Welcome to AI for Good, the leading, action-oriented, global and inclusive United Nations platform on AI. Organized by the International Telecommunication Union, the United Nations Agency for Digital Technologies, in partnership with 50+ UN sister organizations and co-convened with Switzerland. The goal of AI for Good is to unlock AI's potential to serve humanity. In today's AI for Good event, we are counting on you to use the live video wall feature to ask questions and post comments to help create an engaging discussion. We encourage you to stay until the end to chat, connect, ask questions, and network with our distinguished facilitators and world-class AI experts in the neural network. It is now time to kick off the session and welcome our first speaker. The floor is yours.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Quantum World Tour. This is our third episode where we will be profiling Australia. So for those of you who are new to the series, I'd really love to take a moment to introduce the idea behind this documentation. And so just to note, there are moments in history when a technology really does more than just progress our understanding of science. It really reshapes the lens through which a nation sees itself. And quantum is really one of those technologies. It doesn't just ask us to think about compute differently, but also to collaborate differently, to imagine differently. And as it continues to develop, it really forces a new question into the foreground, which is, what does it really mean for a country to build a quantum future? And that question is really what we want to answer at the Quantum World Tour. It's why we're going continent to continent, not just collecting the headlines and the countries, but studying the strategies to spot the innovation and also listen for architecture. Because what we found again and again is that while science is global, the paths to quantum readiness are actually very profoundly local. Each country builds from a different soil, and each one reveals a piece of the larger playbook that we're all trying to write together. So today we turn our attention to Australia. So Australia has something very, very rare, and that is strategic coherence. In 2023, Australia released its first national quantum strategy, which is a document that was both aspirational, but also mapped them across 5 pillars, which were research and development, infrastructure, workforce, standards, and inclusion. It positioned quantum not just as a scientific priority, but also as a sovereign capability. The government backed this with billions in aligned funding, including a $1 billion Australian dollars through the National Reconstruction Fund for enabling tech like quantum. It also invested publicly in PsiQuantum's future fault-tolerant quantum computer to bring it to Brisbane, which is a global first, both in scale and intention. So this isn't just about policy. This extends to what it takes to build an ecosystem. If we look at the deeper ecosystem of Australia, we see this growing lattice of interconnected players. So startups like Silicon Quantum Computing and Dirac are spinning out from decades of atomic scale research and development at the University of New South Wales. We look at software leaders like Q-Control, who are pioneering quantum control as well as defense-grade navigation systems. There are research hubs like the ARC Centre of Excellence for Engineered Quantum Systems, QBIC, the Australian Research Council Centre of Excellence for Quantum Computation and Communication Technology. And these are all national centers that have collectively published over 2,000 quantum papers and produced over 100 patents. If we look at the education pipelines, these include the world's first bachelor's in quantum engineering at the University of New South Wales and master's programs coming out of both the Australian National University and the University of Queensland. So this is very intentional orchestration of what it takes to build an ecosystem. Even the states within are playing their part. We see New South Wales helping seed the Sydney Quantum Academy. Victoria invested in Quantum Brilliance's Diamond Quantum program. And Queensland launched its own strategy and committed capital to advanced quantum infrastructure. This is very much a whole of nation approach. What's really compelling about Australia isn't just the coordination, but how it converts constraints into the underlying strategy. If you think about it, Australia is a very geographically vast country, but it's cultivating tight regional clusters. Sydney for silicon spin qubits, Melbourne for photonics, and Brisbane for optics and sensing. So even though this is a place of remote landscapes, it's really focused on developing portable quantum sensors for mining and defense, which is very interesting. And even though there are, like geographically, it's far from global centers, it's built deep alliances. So with the US through AUKUS, which is a trilateral security partnership between Australia, the UK, and the US, through the UK and Japan through Quad, and with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and European partners through both bilateral deals and research exchanges. This is all comes together to see how the country is ranked top 8 in global quantum publications and top 6 in number of universities with quantum programs. Really, really interesting is that it already hosts 3.6% of global quantum venture capital, despite being just 1.6% of the venture landscape overall. So why are we here and why does this matter? Because this isn't just about how a country participates in quantum, but how quantum participation is built. And when we have the opportunity to document stories like this, deeply, accurately, and respectfully, we're able to not just show the momentum, but to translate it, to give others the scaffold to build their own. And the Quantum World Tour really exists to do that, to surfeit these tacit strategies, the bets, the blueprints, the trust building, all of these which turn research into national resilience. Australia is a great reminder that coherence is just as powerful as capital and precision is just as meaningful as speed. And even on a continent that is defined by distance, connection can definitely be the greatest quantum strength. And with that, I'd love to turn it over to our first speaker, Petra Andrén, the CEO of Quantum Australia, who will provide a briefing on Australia's national quantum efforts. Welcome, Petra.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to make sure that you can all see my slides. If you can give me a thumbs up, Sarah, that would be awesome. Just to make sure that I am indeed sharing. Fantastic. That was a really great overview. Really appreciate it. What I'm going to do is just go a little bit more into the details. As mentioned, over the actually past 25 years or so, Australia has laid the foundation of quantum research. So we are in a very enviable position. And, you know, from the world's first single atom transistor to Nobel Prize winning physics. But discovery is just the first chapter. And today, Australia is turning breakthrough research into real world technologies. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. My name is Petra, as mentioned, and I'm the CEO of a recently established National Industry Growth Centre, Quantum Australia. And our purpose is to accelerate the growth of Australia's quantum industry. I will give you an update today on our activities and also, of course, where Australia's at on its quantum journey. So I will warm you up and then we're going to have the panel after that that's going to be able to dig in even more. But let's get into it. So, and the place to start really is with the national strategy. Now, Sarah already mentioned the strategy. We were actually one of the first countries to have a national strategy, and that was launched in May 2023. And as mentioned, the vision here is for Australia to essentially, by 2030, be recognised as a leader of global quantum technologies, and where quantum technologies, of course, also is integral to a prosperous, fair and inclusive Australia. And there are 5 themes, as already mentioned, under this strategy, but I want to go through them just a little bit in more detail. So the first leg, of course, is thriving R&D, investment into quantum, and the use of quantum technologies. Adoption is very important, that link with industry. Secondly, the second pillar really is about a skilled and growing workforce to match industry needs. That is, of course, also very important. Then thirdly, we've got standards and frameworks that support the national interests, access to essential quantum infrastructure and materials, and finally, of course, a trusted, ethical and inclusive quantum ecosystem. Let me just get to my next slide. There we go. And the national strategy also calls for a unified voice for quantum, and that is Quantum Australia, a unified voice for Australia's quantum ecosystem. We, as Quantum Australia, we coordinate efforts across states and territories to really maximise the benefits of collaboration. We're a partnership between 13 universities, federal and state governments, and we have staff embedded in those 13 universities across the country to, again, help align priorities, share resources, and leverage synergies nationwide. And how do we do that? Well, Quantum Australia, we have really 3 program pillars, if you like, that help us deliver on this national strategy. If we start with, to the left, ecosystem. Now, ecosystem, it's all about connecting the dots between the ecosystem players, raising awareness, and of course, getting adoption of quantum with end users through workshops, events, and also public engagement. It is so important that the public also understands what quantum is all about. So we're building an inclusive ecosystem. The second program pillar, partnership program. Well, this is where we bring research and industry together, where we bridge that gap. So it's really about discovering and developing new use cases. And also, of course, promoting this also at the international stage. And thirdly, we've got new ventures where we are creating startups and also supporting them with the resources that will fuel their growth. So, the secret to our success, however, with our programs isn't to have 3 programs that operate in silos. The secret really is that they are all very much interconnected and not siloed in any way. And at the center of everything that we do, we have this ever-growing community of practice, which is made up of investors, companies, end users, really everyone who's quantum curious and that can help us shape this industry together, which is what it's all about. So just in the last year, I think we've held some 23 events across the country, many more that we participated in, but that we've originated, and we've helped some 360, almost 400 researchers and entrepreneurs, added almost 4,000 new contacts into the ecosystem now, and perhaps most importantly, we're working on 66 use cases in collaboration with industry. So let's look at where our ecosystem stands today. And Sarah did a great job of giving us an overview, but let me dig into a little bit deeper perhaps. As she mentioned, there has been a lot of investment into this ecosystem, some over the, almost, well, more than 2 decades. So some $2.3 billion in investment has created the infrastructure and the talent base that we rely on today. So we're very, very lucky in that sense. We've got 26 leading research organizations and some 60 plus academic groups that are really driving the breakthroughs for this industry. Sarah also mentioned 24 universities, 53 world-class labs that are really powering advanced R&D. We rank top 5 at the moment in terms of global workforce, the workforce size, and we have over 40 quantum tech companies. Now, that's quantum pure. If we were to look at enablers and adjacent, quantum adjacent companies, there'd be many, many more. And many of these companies have actually been formed just in the last couple of years, and we're seeing an enormous increase actually in number of companies being formed at the moment. So I think, it's almost fair to say that our ecosystem is on fire. Let's look at the trajectory. If we fast forward to 2045, these are some recent numbers that have just come out, and they look at where we could be. So $5.9 billion in industry revenue, and a workforce that is more than 35,000 jobs across the wider ecosystem. If we look at the GDP contribution, we're looking at $6.1 billion in GDP contribution. But what's interesting here is that 2.4 billion of that 6.1 is actually productivity gains. So again, it just goes to show that we are bridging that gap. And when I say bridging that gap, we're really getting quantum into industry, into end users, which is really what it's all about. This is obviously quantum year, but Australia has had a quantum year as well, and what a year it has been. I can't really do it justice, so I've just really selected a couple of highlights. I apologize. There's so much more. I could go on forever, but we are limited on time. So let me just pull out a couple of highlights from across the quantum stack. So I'm going to start here with cybersecurity. Australian company Quintessence Lab, they secured funding from the National Reconstruction Fund, which is Australia's government's $15 billion fund that supports critical industries like the quantum industry. And this has really given them money and backing to scale globally. In the hardware space, we've got Quantum Brilliance that we'll hear from later as well. They're creating Australia's first diamond-based quantum foundry, which is exciting, which is also supported by the National Reconstruction Fund and other funding sources. Looking at the quantum control. In quantum control, we have global leader Q-Control that was mentioned earlier, raised the world's largest Series B round in quantum, $113 million US, partnered with IBM and demonstrated quantum advantage through their control software and navigation trials. Moving on to Australian quantum computing, because we have some major milestones that were hit there too, by Silicon Quantum Computing and Dirac. They were both selected for the DARPA benchmarking initiative, developing fault-tolerant systems for the future. And of course, we've already mentioned the mega-scale photonic front-side quantum, pushing toward a million qubit system near the Brisbane airport in Queensland. That is $1 billion project, and it is already well underway. And finally, look, I just picked one. There are so many research breakthroughs all the time. One that I thought was worth mentioning here is the team from University of Melbourne. They won the Gordon Bell Prize for the first quantum accurate biological simulation. But like I said, I'm not doing it justice. I could talk about this for more, but let's just say it's been a big year for Australia, and it's continuing to be a big year because we're building on that foundation. And on that, like I said, just a few highlights. Our ecosystem will be on display again in 2026 when we've got our annual conference. We have this annual conference that we move around the country. So this year it was in Brisbane, but next year in April, 28th of April 2026, it'll be happening again in Adelaide, South Australia. This conference attracts delegates from all around the world, and this year's theme is really going to show off the maturity that the ecosystem is now at, not just in Australia, but also in the rest of the world. We're really trying to focus in on industry and end users, just again reflecting that maturity. It's not just all about research in the lab, it's about real world impact. With that, I'm just going to encourage everybody to stay connected with us. We would love to hear from you. Please use the QR code if you want to get into the Quantum Australia website and find out more about the ecosystem and stay up to date on how it's growing. And with that, Sarah, I want to actually leave it to the panel because I think I have spoken enough, but hopefully set the scene for us all.
Thank you so much, Petra. A really incredible comprehensive overview of how Quantum Australia has really contributed to building out this national ecosystem. Before we get to the panel, I really wanted to bring attention to three things that you mentioned in your presentation that I think are really important for our audience, which is first, really seeing quantum as being foundational for a prosperous and inclusive future. The second being that building that future requires a unified voice. And this is really where Quantum Australia has stepped in and connected efforts across states and sectors and institutions. And that third, none of this really matters unless the public understands. And that awareness is a big part of the infrastructure and the trust. I also think it's incredibly important to draw attention to the point you made about Australia making this very early decision to commit. So I think you said over 2.3 billion has been invested over the course of 2 decades. And this really was essential to building the capacity for quantum. So not just in research, but also in the infrastructure and talent to sustain it. And I think that speaks to something much deeper, which is this willingness to recognize and embrace that quantum has a long horizon. It absolutely demands patience and the ability to nurture capability. And that when you pair ambition with consistency, it really pays off. So thank you again. Really appreciate it. And with that, I'd love to welcome our next guest, which will be on our first panel. And this is really about how do we shape quantum from multiple vantage points, from deep research to foundational physics and frontier ventures, as well as how teams align national priorities with commercial acceleration. And so with that being said, I'd love to welcome Professor Jingbo Wang, Director at the University of Western Australia, Marcus Doherty, co-founder and CTO of Quantum Brilliance, and Trudy Kennedy from the Critical Technologies Growth Team at the Australian Department of Industry, Science and Resources. So welcome to all of our panelists. And before we get into the questions around national strategies and priorities, I'd love to take a moment to ask each of our panelists, and feel free to share as much as you'd like, what do you want quantum to do for your country?
So I can get us started. I think quantum technology has a real opportunity to really uplift the security and prosperity and quality of life for Australia. And it can do that in a variety of ways, but we can get into that as we get into the panel. So perhaps hand over to the other panelists.
Yeah, and here's Jingbo Wang from UWA. I'm a professor doing research and to provide training to the next generation engineers, scientists, and researchers in the domain of quantum. Yeah, to me, quantum, in particular, quantum computing is not just about computing. And quantum computer, someone made a more like a microscope. And many ago were trying to say, other people asking, what would you be able to say? And it discovered a whole new word. And I started drug discovery and microbiology. So technology per se, but it's a new way to discover a new science. And so we don't even know what we're going to say. Yep, so pass on to...
Thanks so much. I think for me, I'm really excited at the prospect of being able to see just how much quantum can help Australians solve.
Oh no, Trudy, you muted at the end of that. I missed the last part.
I'm sorry, I'm not too sure where I cut off. Yeah, I'm just really looking forward to seeing just how much quantum can help Australia and Australians solve some of the most significant national challenges and set us up for a really bright future.
Awesome. Thank you all. I really love that there's quite a unified focus on how this lends itself to the prosperity of Australians at scale. And I think that's really, really great. So thank you for all taking the time to answer that. And I'd love to jump into the conversation and really broaden the lens about here. So what are some unique challenges from your perspectives, each of your perspectives really, what are unique challenges and advantages that Australia faces that are very specific to Australia when it comes to building the quantum ecosystem? And whoever would love to pick that up first, feel free to jump in.
So I'm happy to jump in. So it was foreshadowed by Petra's conversation before, which is, you know, Australia has this aspiration in 2030 to be competitive in the quantum technology industry. And Australia has this fantastic history and background in research and development of quantum technology. The mile we've got to get through now, though, is really that translation into product and then the production and delivery of product. And Australia has some things there, but it's missing other things. And so, for instance, one of those things being the supportive elements of a vibrant semiconductor industry for hardware. productization and manufacturing. And so as a result, Australia has to do a lot of work to go and piece those other bits of the puzzle together around the world. And so as a result, that's one of the challenges Australia faces, is piecing together all the parts of the puzzle to deliver product. And Petra mentioned the investment into quantum brilliance to deliver the quantum diamond foundry. That's one step on that journey. And so that is investment here in Australia to make things easier. There's lots of other steps which are needed as well. Inevitably, Australia will have to work globally to bring these products together.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that. I think Australia has, especially in the quantum domain, decades of research backed up by government support. It's a really strong research base and has international credibility. And many of our researchers are world leading in multiple fronts and well known. So we actually started, I think, way ahead of many other countries, and it's leading by mostly in the university, but also joined by lots of startups. And surprisingly, almost everyone I know now has sometimes it's quite big-sized companies, but many of them they have started to really trying to think about research translation. I think that's a really pleasing trend to see here in Australia.
Thanks, everyone. I mean, I really do just want to touch on some of the advantages that we do have in Australia, just to follow on from everyone else. I mean, as just discussed, like the Australian quantum ecosystem is really healthy. It's growing. We've got over 20 Australian companies and some active involvement by, I think, 26 foreign companies, including IBM, Google, AWS, Microsoft, NVIDIA, PsiQuantum, just to name a few of those. Many of these businesses, have announced some technology roadmaps. They've achieved milestones and completed successful capital raising rounds. They've forged relationships with multinational technology businesses. And underpinning these achievements is our access to some really high quality talent and leadership, supported by 5 ARC Centres of Excellence, 16 universities. So the quality of our talent is also a big drawcard for international companies. Several international companies have established presences in Australia because of our excellent quantum talent. I mean, in terms of sort of the challenges that you asked about, one of the things that we are aware of, the access to that patient and trusted capital is an ongoing challenge for the sector, particularly given the dual use nature of many quantum technologies.
Thank you all. I think that's incredibly insightful. So a few things that really stuck out to me is one, Marcus, you mentioned there's this need to really transition into commercialization. And Dr. Wang, you mentioned that we need to translate research. And Trudy, you spoke to the importance of having, you have this foundation of very high quality talent. And this is very interesting to me because when we speak to other countries or even local regions that are starting to build their quantum ecosystems, they're very much noticing that the biggest challenges in quantum are definitely this move to commercialization. And also, how do we do that when we don't have a solid workforce? And so I think it's interesting because Australia has invested in this for such a long time. And even still, we're still working through how to build that scaffolding. So I think it just further speaks to this is very much a long-term commitment. And I hope that many people begin to understand that this needs to be a long investment and not something we invest in for a little bit of time and hope quick turnaround. It really is going to take time. So that being said, I'd love to kind of come back to this. Marcus, you mentioned that there's this really strong history of research and development in Australia. And so as of right now, there's very much strong research capabilities in sensing, photonics, communications. So really curious to understand,
How were these focus areas chosen for Australia, and how do they align with national priorities such as with defense, critical technologies, industry diversification, etc.?
So I can say a few words about how they came about in terms of these strengths, and then in terms of the priorities, I think it's a marriage of the perceived value of the different technologies which are being developed against then the strengths that Australia has and the opportunity that Australia has, and then leading to the priority setting. The emergence of these things in Australia really came about from the late 1990s, where there was the Kane quantum computer, which was proposed, and that gained a great deal of interest and then followed through to sustained government investment from the late 90s through 2000s and onwards. And over that, we saw various centres of real research excellence grow in Australia. So one example is quantum optics, which was founded at Australian National University as well as in Queensland, and that did a terrific amount of work, and that gave birth to people like Jeremy, who's the CEO of PsiQuantum, etc., who have gone on to found these companies through careers through the UK and US. And we also saw centres of excellence in silicon quantum computing, diamond quantum technologies, and a variety of others as well. I think that then leads to then a marriage of the different technologies against outcomes for Australia. So national security is obviously a key driver for some of the discussion, which then really takes us towards sensing and some of the longer term value of quantum computing, and then economic growth, as well as quantum communications, on the security side, but the potentially the largest economic developer being computing, and Australia finding its way to participate in computing, but also benefit from quantum computing in the broader industry.
Yeah, so I just like to add maybe I'll talk a little bit about this quantum. Quantum becomes a buzzword, especially in recent time. But people, quantum is not really a new thing. It's been with us for 100 years. So not many people realize what actually underpins the second quantum revolution is the ability to manipulate single quantum particles. And that really changes the thing. Quantum has bring most of the modern technologies, including the NMR, many of the medical instruments, and laser, of course, and so on and so forth. But the ability to be able to manipulate a single atom, a single photon, and a single electron is unbelievable. So quantum computer also comes a long way now. When people started this a very theoretical kind of idea about debating about the interpretation of quantum mechanics and really try to understand physics from the most fundamental point of view, to someone who actually won the Nobel Prize this year, building a 54 qubit system, which is manipulating basically 54 very quantum entity. So things has changed so much since then. And last month, Caltech research group announced more than 6,000 individual atoms being able to be manipulated. I think that has changed the thing. Underpins, as far as we can see, every possible industry displaying and defense and so on, and critical technology. So I think it's really pleasing to say Australian government is investing very, very significantly this year and in the next couple of years. And including one of the things Petra mentioned is the National Reconstruction Fund, which in total is $15 billion. And a big chunk of that will be for the critical technologies. And the CTCP program, which is this critical technology challenge program, it's another $36 million, plus Quantum Australia, which is the Australian Centre for Quantum Growth. And altogether, it's more than $20 million of support. One last thing is especially very, very important for education and for university is the training center. I think we have ARC training centers for future leaders in quantum computing, for example. That's multi-million-dollar investment. All this I can say will train and retain talents, hopefully in Australia.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really, really love to hear that so much has been really committed and invested into the research and the development of the fundamental science, which will really be essential in driving forward the technology. And Marcus, you mentioned at the beginning that security is really this key driver. And I think that's pretty much like global. We're really seeing that as the first most critical use case. And so with that in mind, I'd love to ask each of you, when it comes to secure quantum communications and security, et cetera, what is the strategy for ensuring that Australian quantum systems are interoperable with those developed internationally? Is Australia involved in standards and interoperability at a large level?
I mean, I'm happy to kick off. Establishing standards that do not inhibit the growth of Australia's quantum ecosystem is actually directly aligned with theme 4 of our national quantum strategy, which is, ensuring our standards and frameworks support national interests, as well as establishing technical committee QT001. Standards Australia has been a founding member of JTC3 as well. And, input is always welcome from quantum experts, and there's opportunities for them to participate in shaping those international quantum standards.
So I think the some additional dimensions there is that in some ways there's different parts of that. So there's standards, which is kind of an emergent thing, which is an agreement amongst the various industry experts. There is then industry practice, what really happens despite the standards. And then there's also the customer side. What is the customer expecting, and how do those customers sort of enforce interoperability across their various systems? And so I think for that last one, Australia is part of a variety of alliances, particularly around national security. And most of those alliances share particular opinions about stuff like adoption of post-quantum cryptography and others. And so that's one level of cooperation that drives this sort of interoperability is those different nations and the defence and security organisations of those different nations coming to agreement about how do they view these technologies and how they see them working together. On the standard side, thanks Trudy, it was talked about the efforts in standards, but then I also think about on the business side about what actually really happens. And this is really about establishing those partnerships between different countries, where the companies in different countries, and creating the ecosystems where these companies work together across country lines, and they as part of that engineer a joint solution which is interoperable as well. So I think there's those different kind of lenses on how do you breed and develop this interoperability.
Yeah, just want to just add possibly maybe what we are liking. So I think there are areas we possibly need to pay more attention to build up national capability. So, for example, Australia is still lacking fabrication facilities. And many of our researchers or companies rely on international large foundries. And several other countries already started quantum test beds, which we don't have. And also there is still a lack of sufficient secured supply chain, and we do collaborate internationally, but to build up this national sovereign and national capability, those areas, maybe it's the weak ones. we possibly need to have some focus on.
Awesome. Thank you all. Very, very interesting to hear. Especially love to hear that quantum experts have the potential to interact and shape standards. And I love that, Marcus, you provided more about the different layers. I think it's interesting. Now, switching a bit more to an industry focus, I'd love to ask, so Australia invests quite heavily in quantum through public-private partnerships. So the one that stands out the most would, of course, be the investment into PsiQuantum. But there's also state-level quantum initiatives, such as in Queensland. So I'd love to know more about how these flagship investments have really added to the momentum. And are there lessons that have emerged about risk, about oversight, and about scaling?
So I could perhaps say a few words about the example closest to me, which is the Quantum Diamond Foundry that Quantum Brilliance is created. And it did so as part of, with the aid of investment from the National Reconstruction Fund and Breakthrough Victoria. And so these are both sovereign wealth funds, and they participated in Quantum Brilliance's capital round. And this is one of the core reasons that they invested in Quantum Brilliance, was the belief in the Quantum Diamond Foundry. What that is about is putting in place a core part of the value chain that then accelerates the commercialization and acceleration of the other parts. And so that's namely the translation of quantum sensing technologies from the Victorian diamond quantum technology ecosystem, as well as Quantum Brilliance's own quantum computing technology. So that's an example where it's not strictly a public-private partnership, but it is strategy-led public investment into a private entity in order to deliver not only an important financial outcome, but also a greater outcome that delivers on that national strategy. And those sorts of things, I think, are fantastic, right? They do the best in all the different ways, and more of those types of things in Australia and elsewhere could be super beneficial. So in Europe, we see the advent of quantum pilot lines being a very similar initiative, which is to block those gaps in the value chain and also enable private entities to thrive by being able to block those gaps, and then the whole ecosystem thriving as a result. So more of that is great, and it's great to see that happening in Australia.
Absolutely. I don't know if Dr. Wang, if you wanted to add anything to that. If not, I have one more question.
It's great. It's great to see. So in the past decade, the investment on the hardware side of quantum technology, which is really, really important to demonstrate what was proposed theoretically actually being made and becoming a dream coming true. So the second round of investment has been focused towards quantum software, which is the bridge between the end users of practical applications and to link to the hardware, to the quantum device currently being built. So that bridge is also very, very important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you all for that discussion. Before we're getting very close to time, but before we close out this panel, very much in the spirit of the Quantum World Tour and about bringing lessons forward to other nations, I'd love to hear from each of you. Each of you have very unique perspectives on challenges and on lessons. what piece of advice or what bit of wisdom would you like to give to our next episode, which is Brazil? Do you have anything you would like to tell Brazil about how to build a quantum ecosystem?
Well, that would presume that we know how to do it, and we certainly don't. So I would simply say, have a go, and do stuff, right? And and we'll sort it out. It'll be okay.
Spoken like a real technology company. I love it.
For me, what I can say is going to be a severe shortage of people with the required knowledge and skill set. And so currently, possibly we have maybe a few thousand people knows how to write quantum software and develop new ways of doing things otherwise not possible. We need 1,000 times more.
Absolutely.
Look, I think for me, as Marcus said, this is assuming that we know how to do it ourselves. But from my perspective, our Critical Technologies Challenge program was really kind of eye-opening for us in terms of how to make sure that the people that need to buy the quantum things know that quantum is a thing that they should buy. And it definitely got people thinking about how this new technology could actually impact their lives. So that program got people thinking about those really nationally significant challenges. Like we had some in health, logistics, energy, First Nations health, how this technology could work there. And we were really trying to bring all the parts together, research, industry, end users. And so for us, that really helped, I think, open a lot of eyes and generate some excitement about the possibilities.
Absolutely. I super appreciate all of those answers. I think that there is just enormous value in just jumping in and doing it. As you mentioned, Marcus, we learn a lot by doing rather than thinking about it, and absolutely thinking about the workforce. How do you build the workforce, and how do you bring this to the public? How do they know that quantum is something that they should be aware of? I think these are all really integral lessons. And so thank you all. Really great panel. We heard a lot about Australia's quantum journey and how it's been shaped by this very, very much long-term investment and decades of support for research and infrastructure, and how this investment has led to the emergence of research excellence in areas like silicon optics and diamond-based quantum technologies. We also talked a bit about current priorities, so the importance of building domestic capability for commercialization, about addressing gaps in semiconductor infrastructure, and aligning quantum development with national outcomes. So with that in context, we'll now turn our attention to the startup ecosystem and the workforce efforts that are underway across Australia. So I'd love to welcome our next guests for the showcase panels. So I'm pleased to invite Aaron Tranter, the CEO of Aqacia, Cassandra Chua, the Senior Quantum Scientist at Emergence Quantum, and Kyle Hardman, the co-founder and CEO of Nomad Atomics. So starting with you, Aaron, we'd love to hear more about the work that you're doing and how this is contributing to the larger quantum ecosystem in Australia.
Thanks, Sierra. And thanks everyone for coming today. It's a real privilege and opportunity to present here and talk about what we've been up to over the last few years. And so thank you again to the organizers for actually inviting me to this. So my name is Aaron. I'm the CEO of Aqacia. We've been around for about 3 years now. And today I'm going to tell you about the work that we've been doing, both helping to enable other quantum companies, but also some of the work that we're doing going forward in terms of things that we want to build that we think are quite interesting as well. So jumping into sort of who we are a little bit, we're a small team. We're based out of the ACT in Canberra, which is Australia's capital, but we're growing. We've been growing for a little while now. This is our original team that's been working in Canberra for a little while. And we spun out of the Australian National University. So this was out of research that was conducted at the Australian National University as part of the quantum optics department, actually. So we're still based at the ANU. We're in the Momentum program, which is out of the Research School of Physics, which is basically a little startup framework that allows startups to co-occupy space within the ANU, get access to things like facilities, talent, and we give a little bit back to the school in return. So if you're ever in Canberra, feel free to come by and say hi. It's a beautiful place. The campus is a really collaborative atmosphere, and we're always happy to chat. So please do drop by if you happen to be around. So what is it that we do? We are a company that helps people to design quantum technology, and there's a few reasons for that. Now, we've heard a lot about why quantum technology is really interesting and the fact that it's very powerful, but it has a lot of other associated problems with it. For one thing, it's very complex, and because of its complexity, it's often very unintuitive. And so what that means is that when you're trying to work with these technologies, getting them to do exactly what you want in the way that you want can be very challenging. Part of this is that the dynamics of these technologies are actually often a little bit inaccessible. And this can be due to difficult measurements, or it can be a fundamental limitation just from the physics itself. And so often what happens is people turn to complex modeling to try and understand these systems and try and understand the technology that they're working with. So what we sought out to do was basically take machine learning technology in the way that it's revolutionized other sectors and actually apply it to quantum technology in the same way. So as we saw in other areas of the world where you've applied to machine learning technology and seen some sort of data-driven change, for example, in things like image recognition, we thought that machine learning should have the same ability to revolutionize quantum technology. And so that's what we do. We enable quantum and advanced technology. And we build a lot of tool sets to basically try and interact with these technologies in a way that removes the problem of unintuitive behavior, inaccessible dynamics, and all this complex modeling, and actually allows the researchers and the people who want to use and develop this technology to get on with the job that they would actually like to do. So to give you kind of a bit of an intuitive example of what it is we do and how we do it, our AI was effectively born from research. So on the left here is something called a cold ion trap. This is often referred to in a lot of different areas as the sort of workhorse of many quantum experiments. And in fact, there's a lot of quantum technology that some of which you might even see today that has this as part of their fundamental sort of setup stages. Now, the problem with this particular system is that there are many, many controls. So depending on how you change all of the different things that you're controlling, it has a lot of complicated things you need to work with, such as laser frequencies, magnetic fields, a whole host of things. And it can be thousands of controllable parameters, depending on how you actually divide this up. On top of that, it also has this problem of partial observability. What I mean by that is that you basically can see the entire ensemble, you can see the sort of global dynamics of what's happening from the outside, but where the really interesting stuff happens is actually between individual atoms or pairs of atoms or small regions. Now, this trap here, which is our experiment, has 10 billion atoms in it at any given time. There's no way I can track 10 billion atoms and tell them where they need to go. And so that's where we start to implement our technology. So in this case, we implement a AI-based control and optimization strategy. Now, the good thing about this AI is that it's, in some ways, how we refer to it is that it's completely untethered from human intuition. And in this case, that's actually a good thing. There are a lot of different ways that you can control the system. And if you try to rely on the sort of intuitive behavior that you're used to thinking about, you often come unstuck, or you get stuck trying to do the same thing with small variations. So we basically teach a machine to control our system. It interacts with the system, it interacts with it experimentally, and it learns how to actually work with the system uniquely. And when we do that, what we found is that we can actually get some really good results. We can actually trap twice the number of atoms in half the time. And what's interesting about that too is that when we actually look at the solutions that this machine comes up with, they're completely unintuitive, which means we would never have thought to try these kind of solutions. And this is really the power of a data-driven approach. The machine can actually learn from the system and see things in a way that we wouldn't normally look at them. And that's really interesting. That shows you that it's very difficult for a human to optimize, but if you give it something that doesn't need to rely on that intuition, it can actually do really well. And so if you look at a lot of quantum technology across the ecosystem, normally people talk about these three pillars, the idea of quantum communications, quantum computing, quantum sensing. All of these pillars have, in some way, variations on this complexity expressed in different forms, but they often have challenges that look very similar. And so a lot of what we do is actually come in and try and provide some sort of tool set or unique application that helps to understand these systems. We don't just black box them. We don't treat them as this in-out problem, but we actually help to understand what's going on while providing a solution that actually helps people to enable their technology. And so Australia has seen an explosion of startups, as we've heard mentioned from people like Petra. And that's really provided a clear use case for us to actually come in, help these quantum companies get their stuff up and running quicker, help them solve problems that they would otherwise have to pay many, many people to do in a way that's useful that they can then deploy. So we've seen a lot of varied applications. We've heard some of the companies mentioned already that we've worked with in the past. So for example, we've worked with qubit classification, which was a project we did with Silicon Quantum Computing, where basically we were helping to design algorithms that could identify single donor defects in their fabrication process. And what that means is that we could take a process that they were using to actually fabricate their devices, which then go into future quantum computing devices, and insert a tool in there which allows them to increase the efficiency of that process. So now they can run this algorithm and have it tell them when they've successfully fabricated what they want to. But then on top of that, the work doesn't stop there. You then want to tune up these qubits. So actually then going in and teaching the machine how to bring these qubits up to operating spec. Just because you've made these qubits doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually operating in the way that you want. They have a lot of tuning parameters, including frequencies and other things, and that's a complicated problem on its own. So being able to implement technology that sits at different parts of this chain is something that's been really interesting for us, and a technique that we've found to be very useful for the industry. On top of that, there's a lot of different quantum technologies that basically work on optics. So things like PsiQuantum's technology, other quantum computing companies, as well as communications, they all rely on some form of optics, quantum optics, and some sort of photonics. Now, if you've ever worked with photonics, or you know someone who does, one of the things they'll tell you about it is that the largest amount of time that you spend is on alignment of these systems. And the reason for that is by the time you build up a system, you've got all these little integrated components. And unfortunately, they all interplay in little complex ways, and the non-ideal conditions of the system means that it's not always trivial to actually get this thing from not aligned to aligned and then keep it there. And so that's why we developed optical auto alignment tools, which actually help to solve this problem in an automatic way. And this is really interesting because it allows remote applications as well for critical applications such as autonomous vehicles and also things hosted in space and satellites. Photonics control is in the same vein. It looks very similar in some ways to qubit tune-up, but basically there you're operating with these really high dimensional spaces. And so these are all things that live in the quantum domain. And these are things that we've been working on over the last couple of years. But aside from that, we also have interesting applications in the advanced technology sector. Usually, if you solve one problem, there are other problems that look kind of similar, but with like a small variation. And so one of the companies that we've been working with at Canberra is PV Lab, where we've developed for them an automatic defect identification system. So people have these solar panels that they would like to image using electroluminescence imaging to look for defects in the panels, and you'd like to be able to automatically detect them. And so we've worked with this company to basically create a machine learning based identification system which can automatically identify these defects. And that's really important because if you have a lot of solar farms with a lot of storms going through, you want to make sure that these farms are operating at peak efficiency. And so that's a really good application and something that we're really excited about. We've also been fortunate enough to be involved with the iLaunch Trailblazer, which is an Australian government-funded program, micro wearables for space health. So in this area, we've been able to develop a number of different algorithms for looking at the monitoring vital signs for astronauts actually traveling up to the ISS and during their stay in the ISS. And so that's been something that's quite different from what we're doing, but the complexity of these tasks is not dissimilar from some of the quantum models that we've developed for looking at signal processing and time domain analysis. And so this is actually something that's very pertinent to the Australian ecosystem because we have a lot of remote health applications in Australia. And so anything that we develop here goes on to have very interesting applications down the line. So Moving on just briefly onto some other things that we're doing. So enabling other people's technology is obviously very interesting, but it's also fun for us to create some technology of our own. So at Aqacia, we've always been interested in the idea of secure communications. How do you communicate securely between two different parties? One of the things that people forget that we rely on very heavily is this idea of random numbers. So random numbers are integral to most secure communications protocols, be it post-quantum or not. And having a source of reliable and truly random numbers is actually completely integral to these algorithms actually being secure at all. So one of the earliest applications of quantum technology was using quantum entropy to generate random numbers. And that's a service that we've been able to turn into a API hosted on AWS. So we start off with vacuum fluctuations. These are fluctuations that are fundamental to the universe. These are fluctuations that are always occurring in the background electromagnetic field, and we can actually measure those. So we measure these, hash them, which turns them from random fluctuations in the sort of ether, so to speak, into usable random numbers. We then upload those to an AWS architecture, and then they are served to users. So for one of the first times, people from anywhere in the world can access true quantum resources measured in our labs securely at the ANU, uploaded to AWS, and then served to people all over the world for whatever purpose they want to use them for. Some people use them for research, some people use them for secure communications, others use them to generate art. The applications for this service is very varied, and it's always interesting to see what people are getting up to. As a final thing that we are looking into at the moment, we've been thinking about the idea of quantum sensors using the atom technology that we've been researching at the ANU for the past 10 to 15 years. So at Aqacia, we actually have a large amount of experience in atom-light interactions. The interesting thing about atoms is that they are extremely sensitive. They're sensitive to their environment, they're sensitive to the entire world around them, and so that makes them a very good sensor with a few caveats. One of the big problems has always been rejecting environmental noise to find the signal that you're actually interested in measuring. And so that's been a big problem for a number of different sensors, not just atomic sensors, but sensors in general. This has a lot of really interesting applications if you can get it to work. You can use it for things like navigation, mapping, and even things like medical applications where you want to be able to sense things within the human body extremely sensitively. Now, because we have this background in machine learning, we've been able to develop technology which basically allows us to find performance boosts that you would not otherwise find in the sort of traditional sense of using these sensors. So we can actually bootstrap things that we've already developed over the last few years, put them in sensors and get these things up to operating spec and reject noise that would otherwise swamp the sensor that you're trying to build. And so there's a lot of different advantages of atomic sensors, such as being able to make them very high sensitivity, the potential for low drift or long-term stability if you design them correctly, as well as this machine learning enhanced approach that I was just speaking about. But in particular, you can actually make these things with a really low swap size, weight, and power. So for an example of one of these sensors is shown on the left here, which actually is a comparison between a 20-cent euro piece. So this is something that we're pursuing at the moment, and we're actually currently raising capital to bring this technology to market. So if this is something that you're interested in, please get in touch. We'd love to talk to you. So I'll wrap it up there so that other people have a chance to speak. I think hopefully I've been able to give you sort of an overview of what we do at Aqacia from our machine learning technology that we use to enable applications within the quantum industry, and also more of the hardware that we're looking to build these days. With that, I thank you for your time. And if you happen to have any further questions or would just like to get in touch, feel free to email me below. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Really love this idea that the vision is centered around that fundamental insight that quantum systems often defy human intuition. And so Aqacia's solution is to tap into that complexity by building tools to help us navigate it. And very quickly, before we move on to the next panelist, I wanted to ask, you mentioned that your tools are really helping optimize photonics alignment and qubit tune-up for other startups. And so I'm curious, as more companies start to scale up their quantum prototypes, where do you see the greatest demand emerging next for optimization, for automation, or for integration support?
It's really a combination of all three of those things. I mean, optimization and control are almost two sides of the same coin in a lot of ways. Usually you get one for free when you do the other one. And so a lot of the time, when people are developing these systems, they spend a lot of time trying to optimize how the technology works. And that's great. That tells you about where you should be. But then you also have this problem of getting back to that point. Okay, so once I found that point, how do I get there? And you would prefer that to be an automatic process, because you can't pay someone to simply stand there and always be tuning up your technology, right? You can't have a physicist constantly on call tuning up a quantum computer every time someone buys one. And so in doing that optimization, we've developed a lot of techniques that actually take you from the optimization problem to the control problem, basically for free. And I think that's going to be the biggest need is really this automation and integration strategy going forth. After you've made the technology and you want to roll it out, what does that solution look like and how do you make it scalable?
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Great. So the next guest in our startup showcase is Cassandra from Emergence Quantum. So Cassandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. I just want to check that my screen is sharing correctly. Does that look all right?
Yes, now it's good. Looks great.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm very glad to be able to contribute to the Australia session of the Quantum World Tour. My name is Cassandra Chua. And in fact, I've been on a bit of a world tour myself, having grown up in the Philippines and did my PhD in physics in the UK and came over to Australia 8 years ago now, where I've been part of the quantum community ever since. Now I'm a senior quantum scientist and founding member at Emergence Quantum, and I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk about our company and how we see our role in the Australian quantum ecosystem. I want to start with a story. I'm sure you've all had some life-changing moments. No matter how much time has passed, you'll always remember some of the details. One such moment for me happened in July last year. We were still working for Microsoft Quantum in Sydney. I still remember the moment. I was on my way to work. On the bus, it was so crowded, you could barely have any space to stand. And that's when I received a message on Teams from our local manager. And it said, "Our site is getting shut down. Please come to the meeting room when you get in." Turns out our entire site was getting relocated to the US. While some took the offer, most of us decided to stay. Not only that, we decided to stay together as a team. I still remember the moment when uncertainty and dread turned into excitement, because now we can make use of our full spectrum of skills and backgrounds. What made us such an effective team in Microsoft to start a new venture. And this is the beginning of Emergence Quantum. Emergence Quantum, we are an R&D company that focuses on developing hardware solutions to enable scalable platforms for quantum technologies and next generation computing. We have 3 research focus areas. These are quantum computing, quantum sensing, and energy efficient computing. In our quantum computing focus area, we develop scalable quantum hardware platforms, cryogenic electronics, RF components, and we design system architectures that will enable us to go from the hundreds of qubits we have today to the millions of qubits we need for fault-tolerant quantum computing. For our quantum sensing focus area, we develop tightly integrated readout and control circuitry for novel sensors, ultra-sensitive detectors across the electromagnetic spectrum and at different temperatures, and we target applications focusing on constraints in size, weight, and power. And with AI applications driving increasing demand in compute, our energy efficient compute focus area targets new computing paradigms that optimize performance per watt per dollar. Examples of these include cryogenic CMOS and low power analog platforms as well as neuromorphic computing. Together, these three focus areas constitute a toolbox that allows us to engage with partners through a variety of engagement models. This really can be tailored to the customer, whether they be startups, large companies, or the government. Our partners span from startups like the RAC through to listed companies like INQ. Some examples of how we engage with startups: we can help accelerate product development through co-designing solutions. Our engagement models range from solution prototyping to deep collaboration on architectural solutions. And we have a team of domain experts capable of deploying rapidly to tackle any near-term challenges. As for large companies, we provide services to accelerate technical milestones, collaborate on R&D projects, whether for internal use or on joint government contracts. We also engage to develop major hardware platforms on large industry scales. And finally, we support the core missions of many US and Australian government agencies via R&D contracts. We also partner and collaborate with government labs to further support government developmental areas. And we are also users of government world-class facilities and resources. Now, one good example, a recent example, is a grant that we received from the Australian government to enable wafer-scale production of superconducting amplifiers. This grant is part of the Australian Economic Accelerator, which is administered by the Department of Education and is focused on supporting research translation of prototypes from university labs through towards commercialization. Our superconducting, as pictured here, consists of periodic features of about a micrometer in dimensions and is repeated across hundreds of cells over lengths of centimeters, and is currently fabricated a single device at a time at chip scale. In partnership with the University of Sydney, we are addressing the challenge of what is needed to commercialize our amplifiers, and that is to produce them at scale on large wafers while maintaining sufficient yield and uniformity. This is a really good example of how the Australian government is supporting the growth of the Australian quantum ecosystem. Our superconducting amplifiers are a critical subcomponent of many quantum computing platforms and will firmly place Australia in the quantum global supply chain. This is just one example of how EQ is contributing to the quantum community. We have many more products and solution breakthroughs to come. At EQ, we are a team consisting of scientists and engineers of complementary backgrounds and skills. We have the expertise, and we are ready to play our role in the quantum ecosystem here in Australia and in the wider global quantum computing field. That's it. Reach out to us, whether you have a problem that needs solving or whether you enjoy solving problems. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Cassandra. I especially loved that you opened with that story. I think it's incredibly powerful that the team came to this decision to stay and just continue developing the technology. I think that's amazing. We really need that commitment long term. Before you go, I wanted to ask, considering your work across this scalable hardware and sensing and energy efficient compute, I'm curious to see where you see the most near-term potential for commercial impact, such as would it be quantum sensing, would it be cryo-CMOS, or would it be collaborative architecture?
Right. If we're talking about near-term commercializable products, I assume that's kind of the direction. There's really applications or possibilities across all focus areas. Quantum sensing in particular is one that has seen a lot of products come to market already. What we see as a primary focus is on, at the moment, is on scalable platforms for quantum computing. In that, that's really where a lot of the market, sorry, let me rephrase. That's really where a large part of the quantum market is heading. So that's, yeah.
Oh, awesome. That's great. I also agree. I think sensing is definitely one of those near-term applications. Thank you again. Really incredible presentation. It's really great to hear what Emergence Quantum is doing, and we look forward to everything that it continues to do. And so with that, I'd love to welcome our final panelist on the Startup Showcase, which is Kyle Hardman, who is the co-founder and CEO of Nomad Atomics. So welcome, Kyle.
Hello, thanks for having me. See if I can just get this presentation up. There we go. Can everyone see that?
Awesome. Looks good.
All right, good to go. Well, look, like you said, thanks for the introduction. I'm Kyle. I'm one of the founders of Nomad Atomics and the CEO. Sounds like not a lot of people have heard about us, so I'm going to go through who we actually are and what do we do a bit. So this is quite a bit different than kind of what you hear about a lot of these, the normal quantum sensor companies or quantum companies in general. Nomad Atomics is really not building a quantum sensor company. We are building a vertically integrated geophysical surveying company. And so what that means is that we are essentially trying to attack every part of the vertical from building sensors, designing sensors, building sensors, deploying those sensors in the field, taking that data, doing a lot of data analytics on that, and providing that final outcome to our customers, which may be across like a number of sectors and resources or other things. And so, this is quite a bit different, which means that, at the same time, we're not building a single hardware company, but I would say more like three smaller companies inside at the same time, which makes it a little bit more exciting, I would say. So we are a geophysical services company, but at the base of that is, of course, some sort of unique technology, something that kind of sets us apart from other people. And that is really quantum sensing, right? What we focus pretty heavily on is on real, truly deployable quantum sensors. So we are really trying to push these things, make them robust, make them low size, low weight, and really low power requirements so that single people can kind of take them out into the field and do real surveying with them to provide real capabilities. And we focus really heavily on this integration part. So that is from almost inception, what Nomad has spent the majority of our time doing is taking, these things that are a room size, 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, and trying to put all of that infrastructure down into a single box, as you can see here in the G sensor that we have in the picture there. So we really focus in the sector of gravimetry, so building sensors that measure gravity and accelerations. And we provide those services to people in the mining sectors, anyone in resources really, energy, defense, and of course space, hopefully in the future when we start exploring things on the moon, perhaps. And that picture just there, that's kind of our flagship product, which is G, or absolute G by Nomad, for those of you that know your math symbols. And that's our absolute quantum gravimeter, and everything is kind of contained in that box. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. So I'll just talk a little bit about where we came from. So there are three founders of Nomad, and we're all kind of experts in this quantum physics and precision measurement world. We've built sensors to do pretty much everything. So magnetics, gravity, time, accelerations, pretty much anything you can think of. two of us kind of came from the Australian National University, just like Aaron, and Chris was a leader of the quantum gravimetry program at Humboldt University in Berlin. And there's just a little timeline here just to kind of show you where things have kind of come from over the years. In 2016, we had towers at ANU that were like 3 meters or 4 meters tall here. Portable gravimeters that took up, whole rooms and massive racks back in 2017. Where we all kind of came together was in around 2020, where we were trying to package these things down and make that first kind of step towards portable systems that you can see in that picture in 2020. And that was a system that we had on a shaker table so we could put around flight profiles and stuff and try and measure accelerations, all the way up to 2025, where we have, actually that's an old picture of G, where we have this actual deployable sensor, something that a person can carry around and put out into the field and runs on batteries, something that's really never been seen before. So a lot of things have happened in the last 9 years, and really a lot of that has happened in the last 5. So a little history of Nomad in those last 5 years. So we spun out of ANU 2021, had a very, very small team for quite some time, split across Melbourne and Germany and Berlin. And in 2023, we raised a pre-Series A round and expanded the team, moved the whole team from Canberra down to Melbourne, and grew the team quite substantially. We built a new space there. We have 3 state-of-the-art labs for development and building production systems, and that team grew from like 5 in Canberra up to 30 across Berlin and Melbourne. And I think now we're probably scaling up to like 38 or something like that in the next couple of months. So all this is fine and good, but I always like to say like why quantum matters at all. And kind of how they work, because I think it's kind of, it's important to understand why this is interesting at all. And they're quite simple in all reality. Essentially, all we're doing, most quantum sensors, some people pull me up on this, but I'll say most quantum sensors are quite simple in this way. All we're really doing is we're taking some atom in a vacuum or trapped in some crystal, and we're storing some information in that system that we know. Like we know what that information is. We then let that atom out into the world and interact with magnetics or something. And the environment changes that information in some way. We can then read that information out, and that tells us something about the world, right? And depending on how we have stored that information or what type of information we've stored, we can make sensors of different things. So we can make sensors of magnetic fields or EM fields, gravity fields in our case, or accelerations, or even time, right? So they're very, very unique in this manner where you can have a single atom or an ensemble of atoms, and just because of how you interact with it, you can actually make sensors of all of these different things with pretty much the same supporting architecture. So they're quite unique. The other nice thing about this, it's really important, is that all of these measurements can be related back to universal properties of atoms that never change. They're the same today as they will be 20 years from now or 1 million years from now, as they are here or on the other side of the universe. We can always relate our measurements back to these things, which means that you can build sensors that are called absolute sensors. They're giving you the true value of the things that you're measuring. And that's quite important. So why quantum? I think if you kind of look at the world that we're trying to measure and you look at what's out there, we would say that there are probably 4 things that you really need to make in a sensor to make it useful and to make a new capability in pretty much any sector that you look at. And that is a low size, weight, and power, high accuracy, high precision, and they need to be robust, right? You need all 4 of these things in one sensor. And if you only have 3, you might as well do it away with other sensors that we already have, because you can, right? But quantum sensors are really the only thing that gives you all 4 of those things in one. And when you look at that, that gives you new capabilities and new ways of measuring the world that you couldn't do before. And when you can do that, you can do all sorts of cool stuff, right? And this is what our bread and butter is getting out into the world with these sensors and doing this cool stuff. And so we have programs in pretty much all of these sectors. across civil infrastructure, resource exploration, cave mining, all sorts of these things here. And it's about how you use these sensors to go out and map the different densities around the world to give you information that you couldn't have before. And one of the things I like to use here is our cave mining thing. We can actually make 3D models inside of the Earth just based off of measuring the gravity fields around them, which is pretty interesting. It's something that you really can't do with any other technologies, and they definitely couldn't do 10 years ago or 5 years ago. It essentially allows you to see into the rock to optimize how mining is being done, which is pretty unique. You can also build absolute gravity networks, right? These let you build, be a little bit better at how you do resource exploration, underground, understanding some geology, like is your continent drifting, is your continent lifting, all of these fun things. You can watch carbon sequestration plumes as they're injected into the earth, and we'll show a little bit about that later. You can monitor groundwater, see your aquifers kind of rise, discharge, making sure that you can maintain agricultural areas. You can monitor tailings dams. You can build new navigation systems, which we're also doing with the Australian Defence. And of course, you can build, hopefully, exploration systems when you go up to the moon and Mars in a couple of years. And so all of these things, there are capabilities and new use cases across all of these sectors that you just can't do without quantum sensing, which is kind of unique that it can spread. It's a platform technology. It can spread across pretty much any sector that has any type of sensing, environmental sensing that's required. So before I'll just close up, I just want to show you kind of the thing that we really kind of pride ourselves on, which was, what we spent a really long time building, which was the G by Nomad. So this is the world's first survey-style quantum gravimeter. We say survey-style, which means that it's carryable by one person. You can actually go out into the field and make 100 measurements with this thing on an ATV. It has all of these characteristics that we were talking about earlier. It's small, right? It's about 20 liters-ish. Has a small power consumption, 70 watts. It's all battery powered. It's very high accuracy, kind of on the order of the best systems in the world. High precision, high stability, right? And as far as we know, like no one else has really even come close with taking these room-sized systems and putting them into a box, a functionable box of this sort of size. And this is something that we really pride ourselves on, is that ability to do that. And people know about navigation systems, people know about how you do resource exploration. So I just wanted to have one little fun description of something that's kind of new and that these things let you do. And some of the things that we look at is the CO2 sequestration, maybe a market of the future. How do you monitor CO2 plumes when you pump them in the ground? How do we know that CO2 is actually staying there so it's not escaping back up into the environment and it's just this iterative cycle of trap it, pump it, it escapes, trap it, pump it kind of thing. And absolute gravimeters let you do this. So we've done a lot of work in this space, figuring out how you can use these sensors to map CO2 sequestration fields and watch the CO2 plumes migrate in the underground environment and actually map how much mass is stored over days and weeks and years, tens of years that are required for these sorts of CCS projects. And so this is kind of a unique application that not a lot of people talk about, that I think is kind of unique and a pretty good example of I don't know, a neat emerging market for systems like this. And so with that, I'll just close up.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Kyle. That was phenomenal. I really loved that articulation of quantum sensors really deriving their reliability from those invariant properties of atoms and how these are really constants across time and geography. Before you close out, I'd love to ask, given Nomad's full stack approach and this focus on applications, I'd love to know, which application area do you think will have the biggest unlock in the next 1 to 2 years? Would it be like resource exploration, defense, or something more unexpected like lunar?
Definitely not lunar, I would say. For us, mining like mine production, active resource, anything, is a pretty big market for us. Resource exploration is a really good nice to have, but the certainty of, and this is going to sound bad, the certainty of needing to dig stuff out of the ground is actually a pretty good market. And this, you know, it's not necessarily a dirty world. This is all part of us moving towards this green transition, and it's something that's gaining a lot of momentum here in Australia and globally. That need to get the copper for the future and those other critical minerals that we need, and mining them efficiently is really, really important, and we help do that.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you so much. Before we move on to our final panel, I'd love to ask Aaron, Cassandra, and Kyle 2 questions, rapid fire, if you'd like to answer briefly. What do you want quantum to do for Australia, and what lesson do you want to give forward to Brazil? And whoever would like to jump in first, go for it.
I guess I can jump in first since I was the first to speak. In terms of what I'd like quantum to do for Australia, I think, you know, one of the things that I see when I'm teaching, and I'm involved in the master's courses that happen at ANU on quantum science and technology, is actually seeing this sort of new area that provides prospects for growing Australia's economy, but in terms of that sort of technology sector growth. So seeing jobs open up that actually grows a whole new area, provides opportunities for, you know, the Australian people coming through who are looking for jobs, looking to do something interesting, but provides an interesting area of work, right? Like, you know, they have that saying, you never work a day in your life if you enjoy what you do, right? And so if you really like doing research, you actually have this interesting opportunity where you don't have to be an academic anymore. You can work in industry and solve really interesting problems. And I think that's really exciting. Opportunity for Brazil. I mean, I think I echo Marcus again, when you say just have a go, you know, like there is no blueprint that works for everybody. And so it really depends on where you are, what the state of your ecosystem is, what the state of your country is at any given time, what's the best thing to do. But if you don't start doing anything and you just end up in, you know, sort of decision paralysis, trying to figure out what's the best thing to do, well, then you absolutely get nothing done. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Great advice.
Maybe I'll go next since that was the presentation order. Yeah, what I really like to see quantum do for Australia, we always hear about Australia punching above its weight in terms of research and innovation. But I think what's the opportunity for quantum here is to go beyond that, to really be able to translate research, world-class research from universities, and translate that into commercial products, into industry, and really create a very robust quantum industry and ecosystem here in Australia. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't have much to say for for advice for Brazil, but yeah, like maybe echoing what the others have said, it's really just there's a lot of models out there, and there's many successful models, and hopefully just try it and one of them works well.
Awesome. Thank you, Cassandra.
Yeah, I think this has been said a lot, kind of in this either in the panel or, you know, what Aaron was just talking about. Australia is weird in that we like went through this time when we had all this manufacturing and we were manufacturing cars and we had all this like really great infrastructure and lots of good jobs in that sector. We moved completely away from that. We like almost completely divested from any sort of manufacturing at all in this country. And you can see it. Like there's just no industry for it, really. Quantum is this really good opportunity to refocus, to provide very high skill jobs and build a new industry based off of really highly technical manufacturing industries. And the US is doing this. The US has always been very good at building, like they invested ever since World War II, in like exceptionally good high-tech industries for that type of manufacturing, understanding that you can't really compete to build, t-shirts. And Australia needs to take that leap. And quantum, because of our background, gives us the opportunity to do that. And so let's build manufacturing centers. Like, let's build diamond foundries. Let's do it. I think that's really the opportunity here. Brazil, same thing, right? Like this is the thing that quantum kind of gets you. It gets you the ability to like really skill up technical people, and like all of your engineers like start learning quantum depending on how big you get. And yeah, I think it's just such a good opportunity to build this new technical manufacturing world based around atoms.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I especially love that not only is Australia united around this commitment to quantum ecosystem, to building a quantum ecosystem, but also in the prosperity that it promises for Australia. So I think that's really interesting that all of you are kind of answering that first question in a very similar way. So very, very neat. Thank you all for your excellent presentations. It's very much appreciated. We'll now turn to our final panel of the session. This will focus on the people who ultimately make any ecosystem possible, which is the workforce. So we'll explore both the current state and future of quantum skills, of workforce development, and of the talent pipelines in Australia. And I'm delighted to welcome our speaker, Peter Turner, who is the CEO of Sydney Quantum Academy. Welcome, Peter.
Thanks very much. Great to be here.
Great to have you. So I'd love to, of course, start out. It's not going to be a surprise. I'd love to first ask you, what do you want quantum to do for Australia?
It's the same want, I guess, I've had for quite a while now, since my PhD in physics, which is kind of an opportunity to continue doing quantum technology, quantum information science and technology as a career, wherever you would like, rather than being kind of forced to move around the world and in the way that a lot of us were early on, and we're seeing that happening definitely with the explosion in quantum tech in the last few years. And I want that to include, of course, being able to stay at home, being able to stay right where you are and have a career doing the stuff that presumably you love to do in quantum science and tech.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really great segue into our next question, which is, how are Australian universities integrating quantum science and engineering into the curriculum to prepare that next generation of quantum professionals and allow them a place to study where they get to stay at home?
Yeah. So echoing what a lot of the speakers said earlier in the conference here, that Australia is building on a solid foundations of decades of quantum training excellence. I think it goes actually well beyond the 25 years that quantum information science has been a thing. We've been putting those words together, for example, in the quantum optics research that was being done here long before that. So it's a rock solid foundation that Australia is building on. There were examples that I think were mentioned earlier on of very current developments, like the quantum engineering program at University of New South Wales. University of Technology Sydney has a quantum degree in the computer science department. Relatively new developments, new ways of training in this field, and there are new master's courses popping up. One was mentioned earlier in Canberra, I think in Western Australia and Queensland, others. So all of that is happening. I think the Sydney Quantum Academy is a unique example. I'll just say a few words about unique in the sense that 4 universities here in Sydney came together, each of which had their own amazing quantum science and technology research groups, and supported by the state, came together to create something bigger than the sum of the parts. So SQA, we do PhD scholarships. We have our PhD experience program, which we might say more about going forward, and more looking deeper into the pipeline on training and workforce and the need to get undergraduates and high school students involved. And alongside of that, the kind of engagement with government and industry that we need to do as the industry develops alongside the training. And so SQA has been doing that for over 5 years now.
That's awesome. That's really, really awesome. So there's quite a solid foundation when it comes to including quantum science and engineering in curriculum, which is really great to hear. I'd also love to know more beyond that focus, that really specific focus in quantum science. How does Australia ensure that quantum training actually spans multiple disciplines? So physics, computer science, engineering, etc., so that the ecosystem develops both the technical specialists as well as those cross-domain innovators?
Yeah, great question. And I mean, the words interdisciplinarity have been used certainly for quite a while in my experience, largely in physics and mathematics. But quantum information science, is manifestly multidisciplinary. So it's you can't do it without the topics that you just mentioned, and that's reflected just within the SQA, and I'm sure more widely in Australia. There are at least 3 different faculties involved in our training programs: science, computer science, and engineering. Whereas traditionally, quantum is a word that you encourage just in a school of physics, right? So yeah, that's definitely happening, has happened. Going beyond that, just speaking for the SQA, our selection process for PhD scholarships, for example, we explicitly include consideration of these kinds of more diverse backgrounds, or I think the word we use is non-traditional backgrounds. So I'd add, chemistry to that list, for example, that you mentioned, but going even further afield in physical science and beyond. Entrepreneurship was mentioned. That goes to this vision, as you mentioned at the beginning, and we've got to have places for people to go, and we know that startups are the #1 employer of quantum graduates. So, SQA, for example, includes entrepreneurship in that PhD experience program in our, kind of added value transferable skills component that we do. And beyond that, I know, there are focused programs on entrepreneurship, both at the Quantum Australia Growth Center that Petra mentioned earlier in the meeting, and also programs run out of the Commonwealth Science and Industry Research Organization, CSIRO, federally, and I'm sure there are others as well. So yeah, that is being recognized already in the training that's going on.
Awesome. So you mentioned some of these programs that are centered around entrepreneurship, which is really great. I think one of the most valuable things we can give to students is this ability to really experience hands-on learning and understand what it takes to actually go out and do the thing. So with that in mind, just to kind of follow up on that, do industry and academia collaborate on talent development? Are there internships, co-op programs, or other partnerships where students gain practical experience in quantum projects?
Yeah, there definitely are. I feel the need to kind of start out by saying that it's important to understand that quantum is quite new. So you can't expect programs, industry co-op programs that run in very mature industries, in science and engineering, for example, to automatically work well. So with that in mind, it is happening. Internships, for example, in the quantum space, certainly. In the last, say, 5 years, that there's been a real explosion in private investment in startups. It's more of a hiring mechanism for quantum startups than it is a kind of apprenticeship, right? And these programs need to reflect that. Like I say, it is happening. So there are several PhD scholarship programs. I mentioned CSIRO earlier. And university-specific ones where there can be varying levels of industry involvement. So, kind of from a light touch co-supervision type of thing with industry to kind of industry co-funding and intellectual property arrangements and that kind of thing. So there are definitely those programs up and running across Australia, and university specific ones. There's existing kind of research council programs. I think the ITTC program was mentioned, Industry Transformative Training Centers. There's at least 2 in quantum, one in Adelaide, one based in Adelaide, one based in Sydney, with partners around the country. So yeah, there are explicit programs there up and running. An example from us, SQA, kind of recognizing this and trying to move it earlier in the pipeline, as it were. SQA, with the help of CSIRO, we're offering kind of short industry immersion programs for honor students in our network here. We have across 4 universities, we've supported over 180 PhD students and almost 160 undergraduate students in summer scholarships, for example. So a pretty big network, and we're trying to make more of this kind of stuff available to those networks.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. I love to hear about that number of scholarships too. And as you mentioned, like, this is very much a new field, and so there aren't necessarily, we shouldn't have those expectations around mature programs. But thinking about it as a new field, I'm curious to hear what outreach looks like in Australia. So what are the national and regional efforts that are being done to promote quantum science to younger students and to the broader public, so that even though it's a newer technology, they understand, they have a basic awareness of it?
Yeah, I mean, this has definitely been recognized. There are many STEM initiatives across Australia. I keep hearing about new ones frequently. Some of them are quantum specific. So I think Quantum Girls was mentioned earlier in the meeting. One of the centers of excellence has run a quantum roadshow, traveling kind of around Australia and helping do outreach with high school kids, for example. So yeah, there's definitely some existing stuff out there, and I'm sure there's some lots more I don't know about. Speaking specifically about SQA, we've been running a quantum camp for high school students, on the order of 10, 20, 30, 40 high school students out in kind of remote areas outside the big city here in New South Wales for several years now. And recognizing the need to address the earlier pipeline, which is obviously the point of outreach, as you've kind of put your finger on in the question. We are trying to do more of that, and I know others as well are as well. Open days, careers fairs, and trying to make connections now, which is new for us, with teachers associations here in New South Wales. And I know in Victoria they've been doing this for several years. And we're seeing real uptake of that. So we had several hundred people attend our first open day a few months ago, I think in July. And we're going to run a brand new event with high school teachers next month, I believe it is. So yeah, that recognizing that to hit the kind of workforce numbers that we're projecting, we've got to roll up our sleeves and go earlier into the pipeline. I'll mention, curriculum's an obvious target as well, but that's a big nut to crack, I think, in a lot of places. High school curriculum, and colleagues are also thinking about ways that rather than trying to change the curriculum to get quantum somehow in there, working with existing curricula to find out where we can bolt on things that are pertinent to the quantum tech field. So all of that stuff is being looked at.
That's phenomenal. Really love to hear that. Thank you so much, Peter. Love to hear how Sydney Quantum Academy is really pioneering a lot of these efforts related to education and workforce. And as we near time, I want to go ahead and start to wrap up a bit. But before you go, I'd love to, of course, ask you any critical lessons, perspectives you'd love to give forward to our next country, which is Brazil.
Yeah. I guess I would start off, it's similar sentiment to what the others have said. It may seem like other countries or areas are too far ahead in quantum, and I don't think that's true at all. I think a lot of us are still figuring a lot of this stuff out. There's still a lot of work to be done, and countries like Brazil can definitely make a contribution there. There's great work going on there as well. So I think feeling that the field is success in the field is closer than you might think, and others aren't as far ahead as you might think. I'd add to that, and this goes to issues in Australia as well. We've done modeling on the number of people required for even the conservative quantum workforce projections, and we really need to step things up. I think an all-of-government approach is advice I would give to Brazil. something that we could also do more of here in Australia. Because I think Jingbo mentioned it's 5, 6, 7 times the number of people we need to train that we're doing now. So that requires real effort from across government and governments plural.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Peter, for joining us and for taking the time to speak on this panel. It was very, very insightful. And thank you again to all of our panelists, all of our guests today. I loved hearing more about Australia, and I know our audience will too. And so really just wanted to reaffirm that today's session was really, really important to see what's possible when you pair ambition with architecture. So we really heard about Australia's quantum story, how it's this product of patience, of long-term investment. We have over 2 decades. Peter, as you mentioned, it goes far beyond the 25 years. More than 2.3 billion has been invested toward infrastructure, towards research, towards the people. And we saw that from this investment, what's possible is that you have world-leading labs in silicon and photonics. You have these breakthroughs in control and sensing, and this wonderful wave of startups that are really translating research into real-world technologies. And thank you again for speakers really giving your perspective, for really pointing out this critical need for domestic manufacturing capability. I think that's really interesting, as well as for a more robust semiconductor foundation and for this really thoughtful interoperability with international systems. And at the center of all of this, of course, are the developments around workforce. So I think what really stands out to me on this episode is Australia's commitment to ecosystem thinking. And that really brings us back to the World Tour itself, which is, this is a series where we believe that no single country has all the answers, but that every country has something to teach. And so by documenting this journey, we hope that we're able to create this shared resource. So thank you again. Join us next time for our episode on Brazil as we continue to understand how we build this global quantum ecosystem.
Thank you for participating in today's AI for Good session. We hope you've learnt something new, innovative, and engaging in today's event. We now encourage you to continue the conversation on the live video wall in the neural network. Here you can ask questions, like and comment, share links, complete the poll, connect with interesting profiles, or speak one-on-one using the chat and video function. We invite you to explore the lobby, try the smart matching quiz, visit the virtual exhibits, poster boards, the e-shop, and build your personalized AI for Good program. Let's shape the future of AI for good.